As I mentioned to you before, we're going to continue in looking at the 4 essentials to life and leadership. And so you'll probably want to back up in your notes to just under that first essential that I made reference to when we talked about character. And 2 of the qualities that we discussed concerning character involve trust and respect. So right after that section on respect is where you'll want to begin this next section that involves the second essential to life and leadership. As you'll remember, I made reference to the fact that there are 4 essentials to life. We talked about the idea of water, we talked about enzymes or food, and we talked about the idea of the sun, and we talked about air. Now, I'm aligning these essentials of leadership to those essentials of life. And I want to take just a moment to talk about this second essential to life, and that is enzymes. Because water is the very substance of life, and so we align that character is the very substance of our leadership. Well, when it comes to this idea of enzymes, let me give you a little history to some things that I've studied in the past concerning food. All food that is not processed, I'm talking about potato chips are not considered food. They are products you can put in your body, but that's a processed food. All food in its natural state, I'll say it that way, has enzyme value. And the purpose of those enzymes is really to do twofold. Number one, it is to aid in the digestive process of the food that you put into your body. When food in its natural state is cooked, the minute you heat it above 115 degrees, every enzyme in that food is destroyed. Therefore, when you eat cooked foods, there's no enzyme value to them. Your body has to produce a digestive enzyme in order to process the food that you put into it. Now, you may not like to know this or not, but your body only produces so many digestive enzymes. And once it stops producing those digestive enzymes, your food does not digest. It simply is pushed through the system to where it reaches a point where it creates bacteria and creates what many have said, 85% of all diseases originate in your colon. And it's because of not being able to process the food that we put into our bodies. If all we eat is junk, then junk's what's coming out. Now, I said that because of this. When we eat food in its natural state, uncooked, the enzyme value in that food begins a process the minute it lands in your stomach. And that process is to fortify energy and give life to your physical body. Your body, it consists of metabolic enzymes that take the nutrients from that food that you've eaten, and it strengthens your immune system, and it gives you energy. That's why a person whose diet consists mostly of cooked foods or junk food probably is going to be more lethargic than most people. Now, they eat sugar foods with processed sugar, and they get a high, and they jump up here, and they've got this energy for this period of time, and then they go, it crashes. It's just the way it works. But when we eat whole foods, natural, raw foods, that's what's going to give us true energy. And it gives us a strengthening to our immune system. An individual who is the founder of Hope Labs, and I can't remember her name, but she stated that enzymes are nature's activists. So as a result, when I began thinking about that essential to life, you can't survive without it. You've got to have food. And if we don't eat more foods that have that enzyme value to them, we're really killing ourselves. We're robbing ourselves of energy and strength. Well, when I thought about leadership, passion is the word that came to mind. What is it that's going to give our leadership the strength that it needs? And what is it that's going to activate it and be a catalyst to activate others that we are leading? It's passion. Passion is going to be that footprint that is left in the lives of others. And you're going to hear various people make statements such as, people who have passion and fewer skills will always outperform people who have great skills and no passion. Every time. I used to help coach, volunteered coach, when we were in Canada at the elementary school where our kids were attending. The purpose was to try to really have contact in the community, get to know people. But I learned some valuable lessons in trying to coach children. It was very interesting because I will take a child that has the right heart and the right attitude without the ability over a guy who's got Michael Jordan ability but the worst attitude on the planet. Because he thinks he's good. And you got to have me because I'm the star. I'm the best on the team. You need me, bro. And I'm like, no, I don't. Sit on the bench. Because I don't care to lose. It's not about winning to me. At that level, and until they start paying me millions of dollars to win, it's about enjoying activity. And I will take those kids that have the right heart and the right attitude who just want to play over those guys who have the skill but are lousy in the attitude department. And you'll find that that carries over into every aspect of life, even here at school. Attitude and the passion that we have for what we do is going to make you rise above everything else around you. If you really want to be a leader, then you need to be passionate in the right ways concerning that. So let's talk about some areas here real quick concerning this idea about passion. Let me share with you a few truths about passion. Now, we tend to think of, which is as the image is portraying on the screen, that passion is all about, yes, I'm excited, I'm pumped up, I just can't hardly wait to get... That's not necessarily the case. However, when we think about the idea of passion, we also need to understand that the definition that we find does carry over into that element of enthusiasm and excitement that we have for what we're doing and why we do it. That's why the first truth is about desire. Desire. First truth about passion is about that drive in our life. Now, I've only been alive 51 years and a few months. And I've learned some lessons, not all that I need to learn, obviously, in life. But I tell you, I've learned two lessons. One is people will do what they want to do. Makes no difference what the challenge is. Doesn't matter what mountain they've got to climb, what obstacle they've got to overcome, what valley they've got to walk through. If they want to do it, you can't stop them. That's what desire does. But I've also learned a second lesson, and that is if people don't want to do something, they won't. And it doesn't make any difference. You can share with them the rewards of doing this, or you can share with them the consequences of not doing this. But if they don't want to do it, it doesn't matter. They're not going to. And you can't make them. If we're going to have a leadership that is driven and fired by passion, then it's got to be the desire within us to perform as a leader. But the second truth about passion is there is no substitute for it. There is no substitute for passion. Because what would you put in its place that would be equivalent? Nothing. There's nothing that substitutes for this. And our leadership must be passionate. Now, the third truth that kind of goes along with this is the fact that it changes lives. I love telling this story. It was so funny. It was my first year here teaching. And the first time I taught leadership, I've changed the assignments every year. So the first year I taught it, everybody had to do an individual lesson, kind of like you do in homiletics. And so everybody had a different leadership quality they had to make a presentation about. And so I just handed out different ones, and different individuals had one. Well, Larry Davis was here, and it was his last quarter. I mean, I was just coming in, and he was wrapping up. And so anyway, he happened to draw the word charisma. And so he did his lesson on charisma. And I'll never forget when he was standing in class, he goes, brothers, this will change your life. And I mean, he was so excited about what he had learned and the changes it made for him, and wanted others to see that it would change their life when they were charismatic. And I thought, that's pretty cool. You see, he was passionate about it. We are in a life-changing business. Now, I don't necessarily like to use the term business, but that's what it is. That's the work we're involved in. It's changing people's lives. I, for years, have remembered Dick Brandt when we were in school, and he would always say, I will change your life if you'll let me. You see, he knew that it started with the desire on the part of the individual, but he also knew that if you allow me to, I will change your life. And that's what leadership does. And when it's driven and fired by a passion for that task and that role of changing people's lives, not just from the pulpit. Obviously, our presentation, whether you're making a presentation in a homiletics class, or whether you're making a presentation in leadership, or you're making a presentation to a congregation or in chapel, wherever it is, shouldn't there be an element that shows the passion that you have for it? And that it's really about changing people's lives and how it can change their lives. Never lose sight of that when it comes to your leadership. Also, another truth is this idea of passion versus personality. And this goes back to the statement that I made earlier about a person with passion and fewer skills will always outperform or outwork someone who has great skills but no passion. And in the end, passion always wins out over personality. You may have a great personality, but if you have no passion, you're dead in the water when it comes to being a leader. You've got to have passion if you're going to lead others, because you want them to follow you. And I'm telling you, if the guy I'm following isn't passionate about what he's doing, I'm not going to follow him very long. He's got to have it, because ultimately the truth about passion is it removes the impossibility factor. This is perhaps my favorite point about passion. It literally removes the impossibility factor. When a person has passion, when they are driven by that passion, who's going to stop them and what will stop them? Now, think about that from a spiritual standpoint. Daniel brought this up towards the end of his lesson or his presentation he was making for the group about Ephesians 3, verse 20. If we know that God has the power to do far beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us, then what can we not do? What can we not accomplish? And think about this for just a moment. You've heard me ask this question before. But what would you do if you knew you could not fail? If you know you cannot fail, what goal would you set? And would you be passionate about achieving it? Because passion will remove the possibility factor. So how do we develop that kind of passion? What do we do to increase our passion when it comes to leadership? Well, I'll share a few ideas with you. Number one, it begins in you. You have to want to be a passionate leader. I can't make you passionate. I can't give you a level of passion. I mean, you can appreciate the passion that someone has who's leading you, and you may admire that quality about them, but that doesn't mean you're going to have it. It begins inside of you. And you have to find a way to feed that fire, to develop that kind of drive in your life. A second way that will help you to increase your passion is by rekindling your first love. You ever think about the letters to the churches of Asia and the contrast of these 7 letters and how that only 2 of those letters are really commendations without any condemnation of the ones who received it? But the one to me that is, I guess there are 2 really that stand out, is the contrast between what we find with the first letter to the church at Ephesus and the one written to the church at Laodicea. I mean, when you look at the church at Laodicea, you see a church that is lukewarm. I mean, it was nauseating to the point that Jesus says, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. I wish you were one or the other. Either get on or get off. Be hot or cold. But this idea of being lukewarm is pathetic. And guys, we're living in a time that is so characterized by the attitude of apathy and indifference. It just is. People don't really care. That's why something can make the news today, and a couple of days from now, people will have forgotten it. It's not a big deal. They're indifferent and they don't care. But the church at Ephesus, at some point, they had something that was driving and that was firing their relationship with God and their work in His kingdom. And Jesus reminds them of the need to return to their first love. Do you remember when you first became a Christian? Do you remember what it felt like? I can still to this day not only remember the day, the place, and the individual, but I literally in my mind can envision that when I came up out of that water, there was an old man of sin that was left there and a new one that came up. What is it that causes us to lose that? What causes us to become cynical, negative, pessimistic? To begin doubting the power of God to continue to work through us to achieve great things. To keep a fire burning within us like Jeremiah in chapter 20, verse 9, when he became discouraged to the point he said, I'm just going to quit speaking His word anymore. And he said, as soon as I do, it becomes a fire in my bones, and I cannot keep it in. What causes us to be so comfortable with keeping it to ourselves and not changing the lives of others? Have you ever thought about something in your life that you could not stop doing no matter what the consequence? I mean, do you have something in your life that you could not stop doing it? It wouldn't matter if it brought death. No matter what the consequence, I cannot stop doing this. What is that in your life? Do you have it? Maybe there's a first love that you need to rekindle to help drive your leadership. Because our leadership class is about biblical spiritual leadership. It's about changing people's lives and leading them to heaven. What is it about that type of leadership that we can't stop doing? We need passion in our leadership. Third, if we're going to increase our passion, I would encourage you to pursue passionate people. You need to learn from them. What is it that drives them? What is it that causes them to have this passion in their life? What qualities? What habits? Are there areas I can emulate in my own life? Now, I may not agree with everything that individual believes or says, but it doesn't mean that I can't learn from the passionate qualities they possess. Do you guys remember when Alan Nally was here and talking about gigantic dreams and the work down there in Brazil?
I was just thinking that when you mentioned pursuing passionate people.
Isn't that something?
Right away.
I mean, it's so infectious, you can't help it when you stand around him and listen to him. It's just like it rubs off on you. You're like, I just love this guy. I'm excited because he's excited. I want to believe what he believes. I mean, they have taken something from nothing and created, by the power of God working through them, an incredible work. And they give God the glory for it. I mean, it's not like he's saying it was him, but you see there's a passion that's firing who he is and what he does, and that's what has infected the lives of others around him. Are you that kind of person? Are you the kind of person that people want to be around because of what you're excited about spiritually? You know, I find it interesting over the years to meet different folks and talk to them about different things in their life that interest them. But you want me to tell you the people I enjoy being around the most, just in conversation, are the ones who are constantly driving me to the Word of God. I want you to see this word right here. I want you to see what I'm learning about God's Word. That's people I like to be around. Because it always drives me. No matter what we are doing in conversation, somehow it always comes back to the Word of God. Spiritual matters. Teaching the lost. Preaching the gospel. I mean, that's what I enjoy that. I love people talking about that stuff. Now, it's not that I mind talking about other things. I'm just not very knowledgeable of them because I don't spend much time in those areas, whatever they are. But what I love talking about is the Bible. And nothing thrills me more than when someone says, and I don't have to tell them, I just love knowing it in my head. Someone says, some passage over there that was talking about where women are to be in subjection to their husbands. They can't remember where it is, but in my mind, I'm like, I remember where that's at. And that tells me, okay, God's helping me grow because that's the focus I want in my life. Nothing wrong. Don't get me wrong, brother. I couldn't tell you the starting lineup of any team in any point in history, not even my own when I played in high school. I admire people who have that ability. And I have started reading that book, by the way, by Joe Torre, and it's good. I mean, it's got some great stuff in it. But what is it that we want to be around? What fires us up? You got to have that in your life. Pursue people who are passionate, and it will help you increase your passion. And then infect others with it. One of my favorite accounts in the Gospels is in Mark chapter 5. I would like to think I'm that guy. Now, not saying I've had a legion of demons, although if you compared it to a spiritual sense, maybe I have at some point in my life. But here you've got a guy that nobody wanted to be around him. In fact, they ran him out. He lived out in the tombs, had a legion of demons until he met Jesus. And Jesus cast them out. And the thing that was so cool is, I would think like all of us, he says, I want to go with you. And Jesus said no. Now, can you imagine how crushing that might have been? Nobody else wants me. You healed me, and I want to go with you. And Jesus said no. Instead, he said, you go to your people and you tell them what great things God has done for you and how that he has shown mercy upon you. And the very next verse says he did. And it says the people were amazed. Are the people around you amazed? If not, then maybe what we need to start doing is sharing with people the great things that God is doing in our life and how that He has shown mercy upon us. If people can somehow recognize who we once were and the changes that have taken place in our life, then share with them that passion that infects who you are, and maybe it will infect who they are. Passion. So, what is the energy behind our passion? Well, let me share with you some physical components, and then I'll share with you some spiritual components to make up the energy for the passion in your life and your leadership. Number one, guys, you've got to learn to get rest. Now, Daniel, I know that movie's 2 hours and 46 minutes long. And I know it didn't start till midnight, so I know at best you didn't get home till 3 o'clock in the morning. At best.
At best.
It's hard to function. You might do it once in a while. But I tell you, you can't keep that kind of stuff up. You got to rest. I used to have guys when I was in school want to stay up all night studying for exams. I'd say, you guys are out of your mind. I'm not staying up all night, never have and never will, to study for an exam. Because I know that if I don't get rest, my mind does not function well. I'd rather get up at 4 in the morning, fresh, and spend the time studying or preparing. That's going to help me more than anything else. But if you don't get good rest and consistent rest, it's going to affect your passion. Because it's not going to take long, you're going to be going this way. And the older you get, the more you're going to appreciate a good night's sleep. Secondly, you need to eat smart. Now, guys, I know how hard that is. I have been from one extreme of the spectrum to the other. And I'm not telling you got to be a vegetarian or a raw foodist or anything else. But I am telling you got to eat smart. You need to think about what you put into your bodies. Because what you put in is going to affect your energy level. It's going to affect your attitude. It's going to affect how you carry yourself. Eat smart. In whatever way that is for you. But eat smart. And of course, you know the third part of this equation is you need to exercise regularly. Do you want to be passionate? Now, if you don't want to be passionate, and you don't care about changing the direction of how you're working in the lives of others, then just carry on. But I'm telling you, if you really want to be passionate and you want some energy for it, you need to exercise regularly. You need to exercise regularly enough that when you can't exercise, you miss it. And I'm not saying you need to be a runner or a swimmer or a jogger or whatever it is. But what I am telling you is you need to exercise. Whether that's walking or running or swimming or weightlifting or yoga or whatever it is. But I tell you what, that period of time every morning for me means everything. It means everything. Because I face the day differently when those endorphins are flowing throughout my body. And I hope I live to the point where I die while I'm exercising. I hope I never get to a point where I never can exercise at any point in my life. Because I know how valuable that is. And I've seen it in the lives of others when they implement it. If you want energy, you got to exercise regularly. I've heard my mom say, well, I just don't have the energy to do it. I said, well, that's kind of the odd thing about it. You have to get started. You have to do in order to get.
Energy begets.
That's exactly the way it works. And if you start doing things and exercising regularly, you're going to see your energy levels increase. That's what it's all about. There's nothing I love more than that feeling. It's better than Mayo or Mio or whatever. Avoid negativity. Now, there's kind of a precursor that goes with this. When you're talking about developing energy for passion, you need to avoid negativity. I'm telling you, nothing gets harder than when you're constantly around people that are just down. It's like, oh, we can't do nothing. Nothing works around here. We set goals, nobody does anything. Avoid negativity. Now I realize you can't avoid it completely. But guys, there are a lot of areas you can learn to avoid. I tell you, I don't watch the news because it's all negative. That's all they talk about is just negative stuff. I think they're trying to create fear. They want us to see that life is gruesome. That's not what Christ came for. He came to show us that we can have an abundant life, that we can have hope. Man, that's some positive stuff. Changes people's lives. It changes yours. So avoid those areas of negativity that are going to drag you down. And I realize there are times you can't avoid it. There are going to be times in your ministry that you're going to have that. But don't focus on that. That's why you need to surround yourself with others who are going to help you and lift you spiritually. Because while physically sleep and what you eat and as well regular exercise are going to help you physically, that spiritual and emotional passion and energy you need is going to come from positive influences in your life. You need to find them. You need to pursue them. I'll never forget the first time I read about John Maxwell back, many years ago when $100 was a lot of money. He would take his vacations every year. Him and his wife would take vacations around going to where there were admired leaders. And he would pay them $100 for a half hour of their time. How badly do you want to learn to be a leader? And to fire your leadership with passion. And then you need to make a decision. Because it's really up to you to decide whether you're going to be passionate or not. And how you're going to accomplish that feat. Now, from a spiritual perspective, you need to develop some daily habits that will help you. And you guys know that you need to be in the book every day. But what I want to encourage you to do is have time in the book that's away from assignments or about sermons you're preaching. Because when you get in ministry, you're going to be spending a lot of time preparing your lessons that you're teaching for Bible class or that you're preaching on Sunday. But do you spend time in God's Word that's just outside of all of that? Just to be reading it. My dad reads the New Testament through once a month. And he reads the Old Testament through twice a year. Now that's not in preparing for lessons or anything else. That's just reading. I wished I could say that I have attained to that, but I don't. I focus a little differently. I'm in the book every day, but I focus a little differently on the way that I'm doing that. But he reads it just casual reading. He just sits around. There'll be times and he'll be reading, and he wants to make sure he reads the Bible, the New Testament through once a month, and the Old Testament twice a year. Now, I don't know about your prayer life. I think there's more to a prayer life than just, well, you need to pray when you first get up before your feet hit the floor and the last thing before you go to sleep at night. Now, I think that's a great thing. But guys, you need to make a list and set aside some time, whatever that is for you, whether it's during lunch or if it's in the morning or if it's in the evening. Now, I'm not saying you got to be a person that gets up in the 4 in the morning to pray. That's not what I'm saying. You may be a night owl, and that's fine. But you need to set aside time. I chose the morning because as the day goes on, I get busier and things tend to pile up. And by the time the end of the day rolls around, I'm ready for the bed. And setting aside an hour in prayer just doesn't happen. But I do in the mornings. And I pray for each of you by name. need a relationship with God, communicate with Him. Open your soul up to Him. Whether it hurts or whether you're happy, whether you're struggling or whether you are seeing success, whatever it is, do not ever stop developing that relationship. It's your decision to be passionate. And the energy you need for it can be just as simple as a few components that you put in your place in developing those habits in your life that will strengthen you in your ministry and in just your physical presence. Now, you guys know as well as I do, because we've talked about it before, that the word passion originally came from a Latin word which has to do with suffering. And I cannot help but think about the idea of the sacrifice of Jesus when I think about passion. This is underneath passion. It's a subpoint of passion. The idea of sacrifice of Christ, the passion of the Christ that Mel Gibson put together, was to emphasize the suffering of our Savior, the suffering that He encountered and endured for us, to emphasize passion. It's kind of the opposite side of what we've been talking about. But certainly, when we have passion for a work, a passion for a particular task, or some area in our life we want to achieve, we'll be willing to make the sacrifice in order to obtain it. Now, there are numerous areas about sacrifice that we could talk about, but I want to share a few ideas with you that hopefully will help you in understanding the direction of passion in your life. Now, if we had more time, and we don't for this class period, to answer the question, why do people lead? There are several areas that I've put together over the years. One, people lead because they want to make money. The drive in their life is to achieve whatever financial security or financial level that is driving them. And they're willing to make whatever sacrifice, even to the tune of losing their family. If it's a divorce, their children won't speak to them. I mean, their drive is making money, whatever the cost. There are also those that are driven for power and authority. They lead because of the need for power. I can't imagine, and I've even asked people in the past, why would anyone desire to be the President of the United States of America? It can't be for money, because they got to have money to get there. The bottom line is it's power. There's something about power and authority that drives people to lead. Also, there are people who lead for their own personal achievement. It's what they're able to accomplish in their life and with their life. It's being able to look back and say, I've got all of these degrees hanging on the wall and all of these trophies that I have been able to win in my life. Personal achievement drives them to lead. It may be that they're trying to build an organization. I can tell you that was not mine when I started. But there are some people who lead because they want to build an organization. They want to take it from the ground level and make it a huge monopoly of business. And there are some who lead because they want to change the world. They want to change the world. Now, I'm going to ask this question now, and I'm going to ask it a little bit differently from the way the time's playing out here. I'll probably ask it differently on Monday. But what would you be willing to give up to change the world? What would you be willing to give up to change the world? Now, let me bring this a little more personal. What would you be willing to do and to sacrifice to change just one person? You've heard that old adage, haven't you, about the idea of, to the world it may be just one person, but to the person you may be the world. What are you willing to sacrifice to change that one person? It may be a friend, family member. It may be a classmate, a peer, co-worker. What are you willing to give up to change just that one person? You see, it's hard to make sacrifice or even contemplate the idea of making a sacrifice when we are so centered on ourselves in our own right than we are in understanding the need to be the world to one person, to change their life eternally. Now, as we think about sacrifice, there are some facts we need to know about it in regards to leadership. Because in leadership, as you're going to see in a moment, it's about sacrifice. Now, what you and I need to know about sacrifice is, first of all, there is no success without it. I don't care who you talk to, and I don't care how you define success. But a person who is going to achieve success made some sacrifice at some level to get there. There is no success without sacrifice. And whether we're talking about physical or spiritual, it's going to involve sacrifice. Secondly, leadership means sacrifice. The greatest leader that has ever walked on this planet, by the name of Jesus, could not have been who he is without the sacrifice. And whether we talk about the sacrifice of giving up who he was in that realm of deity to take on human flesh, or his sacrifice in going to the cross, leadership involves sacrifice. Also, we need to know that leaders lose the right to think of themselves. And that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part, is realizing that when we take on that role of leading others, that we lose the right to think about self. And our leadership will always be hindered when we are more consumed with I or me than I am you and us or we. I find it interesting that the word sin, right in the very middle of the letter, is I. You lose the right to think of yourself when you become a leader. And the higher the level of leadership, the greater the sacrifice. Think about what a person like the President of the United States. Now there's a high level of leadership, if you will, from a governmental standpoint. And think about the sacrifices he has to give up in order to take that position. He has no privacy at all. And his responsibilities, we probably can't even imagine. We just hear what the media wants us to hear, and not even contemplating the level of sacrifice that's involved. But the other area you need to know about sacrifice is the need to avoid the destination disease. Now, the destination disease is simply this, and that's the idea that when you reach a destination, when you reach a certain point, that you've made it and you're done. You don't have to study anymore. You don't have to learn anymore. You don't have to do anymore. I am there. I have reached the pinnacle. When you have, and you think so, you're already starting on the downside of that pinnacle. Guys, the temptation is going to be, and I've heard guys say when they left school, I don't have to open my Bible now. I'm like, you're in trouble. They were so tired of being in the book every day and studying every day. And they were so burned out from it that they said, I'm not even going to open it for at least a month. And I'm like, okay, we lost something here in school. Avoid that disease. When we come back on Monday, I'm going to show you a couple of charts that I've put together for the idea of sacrifice, how that fits with leadership, and then we're going to finish out this section on Monday and talking about the third essential to life and leadership. There's another component to passion that we're going to talk about, and that's self-discipline. We'll talk about that on Monday. And then we're going to close out in talking about those other areas regarding the third and fourth essentials to life and leadership. So we'll pick up with that on Monday, and I'll give you some information on Monday regarding how we will take care of things on Wednesday and where we